side and is away for good reason. Next week, Olive Barrows takes over. First up, let's look at what we are focusing on today.
Now let's switch gears and talk politics.
ODM leader Raila Odinga.
Wiper party leaders now want Odinga.
As the media fuel the 2022 succession debate, that's the question we ask.
Kenya, every day is a campaign day.
In my own opinion, I think media is not playing politics.
Kenyans give their reactions on our media coverage of political affairs.
I got to the stadium at midday, and at midday the stadium was 80% full. And the crowd outside was amazing. You get into the stadium and you feel as though you're covering a real football match.
And tonight on the backstory, we feature Team Olobulu, a veteran sports journalist who's been covering all the sporting events in the country. So that is the main focus of discussion today. And there's a lot of reaction on my Twitter handle as well as to whether media in general have fueled the 2022 succession debate over the development agenda. Some of you say there's no development report. Others say that media have been bought by politicians. I have veteran journalists with me here in studio, plus people who actually send out the media people to go and cover these events. Do they specifically tell them to go and look for that political angle? What does their training say? And what do the veteran journalists think? I'll cover that in just a bit, but for now, here's what you had to say.
Yes, I think we see that the media is almost overdoing it, driving the 2022 politics and not leaving much room or space to discuss the actual development agenda.
Jambo ambalo hatujapendezwa sana kama wapiga kura, maana kila wakati tukiangalia runinga tunasikia 2022, 2022, 2022, lakini tungependa kuwauliza hawa watu, ni wakati gani mtaruhusu taifa lifanye maendeleo na tusahau mambo ya kura kila wakati? Bado tuna miaka minne kule mbele.
Mambo ya media wameongea sana, mambo ya siasa za 2022, na ni vizuri wakati huu tuangalie mambo ya maendeleo ya nchi, sababu uchaguzi wa 2022 uko bari.
Media ndio inachangia sana kuleta wanasiasa kupiga siasa ya 2022. So ningeuliza media ituletee mambo ya biashara, mambo zingine ambazo zinatuma wananchi wakuwe na sober mind na warelax, waache kufikiria mambo ya 2022.
Watu wa media, ni nini hasa mnapata kwa politics? Ukiangalia mkiamuka kesho na kesho kutwa, ile yote mnaongea kuhusu ni kuhusu politics 2022.
Kenya, every day is a campaign day. Hiyo ndio ile kitu iko kwa mawazo yetu ya Wakenya. Kwa hivyo hata kama media inachagia ama haichagii, media walijua venye Wakenya wanataka. Kwa hivyo kila wakati ni siasa. Na kusema ukweli, more than 60% of the media news in Kenya, it's all about politics. Maendeleo inakuja baadaye.
Na kusema kweli, media huwa wanaripoti mambo ya maendeleo ya hapa Kenya. Sio kwamba ati wanaangalia mambo ya 222.
Kwa ujumla media inaangazia mpaka kuhusu mambo ya jamii na maendeleo vile watu wanaendelea.
In my own opinion, I think media is not playing politics. They are also meditating on issue of development agendas, especially when they single out where politicians are not doing well.
There are a lot of positive things that is happening in the country, yet media does not give that much needed coverage.
Vyombo vya habari aswa vimezingatia siasa za mwaka 2022 kuliko hata agenda za Rais Uhuru Kenyatta, kwa sababu kila siku unaona kwamba siasa zimetapakaa, watu wanatembea kila mahali wakifanya siasa.
In as much as we are saying that we are giving more prominence to 2022 politics, I would want to dispute a little, because if not the media, where would we be? Yeah, it is the media that has set discourse, and it is good that the media is talking about it, so that we as citizens should be able to give our opinion and evaluate Are they giving us the right thing so that we are able to judge our politicians?
All right, that is you having your say on whether we propagated the 2022 conversation. And I want to bring out my panelists tonight, starting from the middle, because we're all gentlemen, ladies first. Robbie Koki Ochieng, lecturer journalism and communication at USIU. Thank you so much for making time for us this evening. And to my farthest right, David McCarley, head of content, Radio Africa Group. Thank you so much for coming in. And a man who needs no introduction, veteran journalist Macharia Gaido, also joining us this evening. Thank you so much. Let me get a feel of what you think from what Kenyans have just said. Are we the ones propagating the 2022 politics? I'll start with you, Robbie.
I mean, you're the ones telling the stories.
But are we the ones feeling it? Because
yeah, I think it's more or less what are the decisions you're making, editorial decisions you're making in terms of what to give prominence and, you know, what to give more coverage. What are you placing in the prominent pages, maybe in the few seconds of news? What are the stories you're telling? So given that the media sets agenda and gives people what to think about, it could be true. What the public feels.
And Wakali, I'd like to bring this to you. Is this an issue of setting prominence? Because whatever we have a rundown and you put the political issues, whichever place you put it up, the Kenyans themselves will start talking about it, even if it's in part 3 of the news. So is it our fault as the media for pushing this agenda, or are we covering both sides?
Exactly, Trevor. You say the truth. I think the people who accuse the media that is obsessed with politics should first reflect on the phenomenon of media. The media largely reflects what is going on around them, around the society, because we report the things around us and we go out to pursue something specifically. But as to whether we are the ones creating the agenda for 2022, I don't think that is fair. I mean, how are we creating it? How are we creating the stories? We are only following what is going on, the debates that are going on, the politicians, what they are saying. And if you talk to people in social circles, these discussions are happening regardless of whether they're actually in the media or not. So the media is actually tapping into what is going on just to give prominence to those stories.
So it's already an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Macharia, do you agree? We're just a reflection of what the society really wants? Or should we
certainly media reflects what's going on around us.
Yeah.
I don't think we create or manufacture news. The people who are out there campaigning every day, donating money in churches, asking for the votes, if today we don't cover them, you will see the backlash. There will be, why are you blacking us out? I watched what people are saying there. I was not able to count of how many say yes or no. I don't know whether that can be a scientific poll. But what I would say is this: Kenya is a political nation. And I don't think we can make a division between politics and development. In fact, what makes Kenya developed in relation to other African countries, first of all, is the politics and the freedom to politic. You go to Uganda or Tanzania or Congo or Rwanda or Nigeria, people do not enjoy that level of development in their politics.
Okay.
You get my point?
Yes, I do.
They go together. And even why Kenya, as a small nation like this, ranks very high economically, is because of those freedoms. That people are able to go about their businesses without too many curbs from an all-knowing government, or too many curbs from some bureaucrat telling them you can do this but you can't do this. You know, those are the freedoms which we exploit and we enjoy. The freedom to politic and the freedom to do business.
Yeah. Koki, the students you train, how do you tell them to identify the news? What should drive them?
I think development stories are geared towards other genres that require more time. They require that you research, they require that you go into the nitty-gritties of the areas you're researching. If you're going into a county X, it will not, if for example you're in county 001, the issues that are affecting that county are totally different. And therefore the stories that should be told are totally different. So if media puts its resources basically on hard news, that is what people like to consume, and that's the politics of the day. But then again, what I'm seeing here, you know, I'm the academician here, is the media saying, oh, we've done all we can to fit within the circumstance, and therefore people want to politic. But at the end of the day, there are other stories that are important. There is the need to connect to the shilling that I give every day to my county governor or to whoever. There is a need to know that story. There's a need for people who are isolated in other parts of the country to know what's happening in another part of the country. Last week I was fortunate to be in Kigali and the Kampalas, and you know, shock on me. I was like, these countries portray themselves as very developed, you know, not progressive, let me say progressive. And when I looked at the blueprint and what I saw, I said, oh my, yeah, like you said, Kenya is ahead. But where are those stories? You know, we began to think that maybe they are content, and therefore the story is their contentment. But with Kenya, we are discontent, and therefore the story is politics.
It's drawing that line, that's where the difficulty is, really, Bankali. Because I was in Tarakaniti the other day, and the first thing everybody wanted to ask me is, ask the people there, they were the stronghold of the Jubilee government, what do they think now? In as much as I was covering all the other development agenda that's going on there, the reaction I got was that I was out there for public relations. What they wanted to know is their stand on referendum and the politics.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you draw that line when they're always shifting goalposts?
So why were you there?
That's the thing. We were there to cover the events that are happening in Tarakaniti. And like you're saying, Kogi, because you have to, there are many other stories that happen in different places in different counties. But how do you bring out the one that people want? Because at the end of the day, you're the one who's serving their interest. If you go all positive, they think you're public relations. They demand for politics.
You know, when I'm asked that question, I always say, tell us the stories that are not being covered, or that are not being told, and everybody keeps quiet. And when we sell that narrative of too much politics, maybe it's because we're looking only at the Nation and the Standard and the Star or whatever else. But just within this building, Nation Media Group, there's the Daily Nation, there's the East African, there is the Business Daily. Each has its own readership, and people have the freedom.
And just to add on to what Machare is saying, first of all, the people who complain that we are reporting too much politics, I don't know who they are comparing us with, because I've traveled around, in fact, in many African countries, and our media is the best on this continent, by the way, apart from South Africa and maybe one or two exceptions. We have a really vibrant media. Now, if somebody says we are covering too much politics, in comparison to which jurisdiction, which European country or American country or African country is not reporting politics? Because if you go to those countries, you still find the same caliber of reporting, inclination towards what the political leadership or political leaders are doing in those countries. Two, and which is my query to those who are asking why we are reporting too much politics at the expense of development. Has reporting politics stopped development from happening?
No, I think the question you are asking is whether the media is reporting about 2022. Not necessarily.
And whether we are fueling it.
Exactly.
Because it's happening. And should we give it a
that discussion? And it's not necessarily.
The biggest political story.
If you decide to give anybody a blackout, that in itself is a political decision.
Right there.
And that's a problem in itself.
But what is politics at the end of the day? Let's go a bit academic. It's who gets what when, isn't it? And therefore, if we are going to talk about 2022, we are talking about people who want to get to that what, when, then.
Yes.
We are not really talking about in between the electioneering period. This is what is happening in Tharaka-Nithi, in so much as they don't want to hear the story. I, in Migori or in Nairobi, would like to hear the story.
But the question here is then that if they are talking about 2022 at this particular point, should we give them a blackout?
No, of course not, but then you shouldn't favor them all the time, I think.
So they should be telling the people who are politicking about 2022 not to do so, rather than telling the media not to cover what they are saying. Because, as I said, we're only capturing what is being said on the campaign platforms, on the rallies, in those church functions. I mean, if you watched what was happening in Mombasa, for example, at the coast, when the DP went there, what were those people talking about? We will be with you in 2022. We are with you. I mean, it's not us who are saying.
Again, the media is following them to the same old places, the churches,
What would you suggest we do?
I
As the
think,
media,
like you
you're
said,
training
I
journalists.
would like you
What
to
would you
go
suggest us
out
to
like
do?
you did to Tharaka Nithi. You're a journalist. You know that you can tell any other story, or you can give a story another angle. Just before this news, we were watching the expose about the medical quack doctor. A repeat of what was done some time back. And that, I mean, I've just been on my Amwik group and guys are like disgusted. Then what can we do about it?
But it took him months to execute that. In
and
the
then
meantime,
that's
the
what we are
politicians are running
saying.
around speaking
in terms
every other
of
day.
resources, we don't refuse that you should talk about 2022 or the politics of the day. But we are saying there are other important stories that need to be corrective, to kind of correct society into behaving in a certain way, and of course propel forward stories that are case studies that we would like to hear about development.
Okay. Ashera, you've been in this industry for long. How do you create that balance?
The balance is already there.
Yeah.
And we have just seen it on NTV.
Then in that case, no one is complaining.
And every day we sit on Citizen, on KTN. And those who don't want Citizen or KTN or NTV,
can watch Family TV.
There's Family TV, there's Kiss FM.
Yes.
I think
there is such a wide variety of media.
Yes.
Yes, what variety,
we do not
but what are you accessing from it? Is it different? For example, is NTV telling me anything different about 2022 than KTN is?
Another thing, let's not forget, when we talk about 2022 or about the competition for political power, it is also a development story. We have had Ruto going around, the deputy president going around everywhere saying his focus is development, dishing out money to this and that project and to churches and to women's groups and anybody else who asks for money. We have seen the president going around said, don't politic, let's focus on development. My agenda is development.
Which in itself
is politics. You know.
But then that limits the stories to what is being said.
What we are saying
is it what are we saying, or is it what the people choose to retain?
No.
Because Neymar
where are you finding
there is no story that is not being told. Where there's an important story of Korea about whatever his name is,
the importance,
the completion, the building of a railway or how it is operating, or the state of the health sector, all those stories are being told.
It is that those stories are not taking the headline. They're not getting the sensational headlines that people like to see. They would like to see them on page 1. They would like to see that to be the first item on the news bulletin. But, I mean, we watch stories up to story number 20. Our preference is based on what we think the public's interest could be higher in.
Yes,
okay,
but
and let me first clarify this. First of all, someone looks at the Daily National Standard or the Stand, says, why are they giving us political headlines? The question is, how did those papers achieve that circulation or prominence or following that these people are asking about to give them other stories? They were covering this politics from the beginning. That is how they got the audience and readership that they have. Now, you don't want us to report the same politics which made you follow us to go and report other things.
No, but I don't think we can
because the other papers which are reporting those other things and giving them page 1 treatment, for example. Okay, let's come in here at Nation Center. We have the Daily Nation, we have the East African, and we have Business Daily. Those are all serious publications. If you want to know what people are reading most, or what people like to read in this country, look at the circulation of those three newspapers.
We also circulation.
So the nation,
no, it's actually related.
I'm giving you empirical reasons why people who are complaining that there's too much politics are in fact interested in that politics, or they're in the minority. It's those two things. Either they're in the minority, or they're actually interested in this politics, but they don't want to say it. Because if they were not interested in the politics, Nation would be selling very few copies compared to, for example, Business Daily. All right? Yet, Business Daily doesn't cover politics. Covers all the business things and the banks and the investments.
I'm sorry, I don't think the audience today reads a newspaper from page 1 to the end. We have access to all your stories. If I want to read him today,
because then they
let me finish. If I want to read what he's written today, I will go straight to what Gaitho has written. If I want to know what Makali, if he has an opinion he's writing, I'll go and look for him directly and read what he... It's no longer broadcast. It's narrowcasting. And some people are just not interested in hearing the same narrative again. What will we spare for 2022? Okay. We want to hear what's going on. Yeah, I mean, if you're already talking about it now, what will we spare for then?
I'm more concerned because you're an academician, and I wonder how you, when you're training the journalists who are upcoming, how do you tell them to determine the news? Is it based on what people want to hear, or do they decide on their own?
It depends. If it is a specialized class, we'll tell them, okay, if it's issues, gender, this is the approach, the genre is this, the feature will be like this. Of course, we have to give them that alternative. What we know the media will struggle with is the resources to have those stories told. But then there are media houses the world over, like the Quartz, others I will not mention, that have changed how they tell the stories, what they give prominence, and that is why they're able to tell stories that are of global interest. So I don't think it's a matter of, oh, what are you training? We train you all. You are here amongst others to tell stories. That's why you went to Tarakanith, isn't it? But we are saying that if resources are put in place in order, then stories that are relevant to my life, to my day-to-day life, and are important to me, can be told.
All right. Macharia, Mulu and Neymar Jr. says Kenyans hear what they want to hear.
Well, that is true because Kenyans interpret things the way they want to interpret them, and they hear what they want to hear. And today the president can say one thing, and half the country hears it one way, the other half hears it a different way. And the more important thing is to understand how the media works. For instance, how decisions are made in the newsroom and in the editorial conference. These are not one-man decisions, or these are not decisions which have not been thought through. First of all, each title has to know its audience. Who are they targeting? Then they will sit around the table and discuss what stories do we have. Each beat chief, business editor, sports editor, health editor, science editor, parliamentary editor will come and say, this is what I have. And as a group, they will sit and discuss, here, what are we going to sell? What can we sell? What can make page one? And just what can make a page lead? This and that. But that doesn't remove the need for instance, agenda setting. So it means a matter of getting the right balance and everything else. And sometimes also a particular publication can decide there's an important position here we have to push and push consistently for a time being, for a while, or they can decide for how long, because they feel it's a major for the economic and social and political development of country, and that happens.
So you've spoken of agenda setting, Macharia, and Dan Kamau here says that maybe even in Kenyan politics sell more, but actually media sometimes twists headlines to start new arguments. Does that happen in the
I wish he could give an example. Because that's a very generalized statement. I wish he could give an example. Then it would be possible to respond.
I think the gentlemen are in order in giving us a glimpse of what happens in the editorial room. We agree, but I think Gaitha is agreeing with me that if you decide as media to give agenda, whatever issue, prominence, you can and you will. Let's talk about a small publication, The Golden Seed, which I know is in collaboration with a university. I know how it operates, but you've given agriculture or agribusiness, some limelight, and that way we get a variety of, yes, we hear about 2022 and how it will look, but then we still learn a lot from that particular. So what stops us from doing a health special? What stops us from doing, what else? Gender or education special.
But it's being done. You're just saying it's not being
done. How
what
consistently and frequently.
What stops us?
What stops us from telling the story that Dan Okari has been telling today consistently?
Well, what stops us is this. First of all, media houses are not charities. They're not philanthropic organizations. They're businesses. They're like banks. If you're not going to deliver returns or sales, all your great ideas and agenda is irrelevant, because the media house must continue to operate and it must sell to make money to continue publishing. That is why I'm telling you that the whole argument that politics is, the obsession, let me use the obsession, is misplaced, is actually wrong. Because if the media houses, whether newspaper or TV stations, were not getting audiences by what they do, they'll have departed from that route long ago. It is because what we serve is what is of the greatest appeal and readership and audience that we continue to do it.
All right.
So if 2022 is the story now, and I can assure you, go to any village,
it is the story.
It is the story. Because politicians have made it the story, not the media.
Okay.
So
that's what they're
the
talking
media
about.
is being driven by politicians, and I like what he said.
Yeah.
That if politics has been selling,
Yeah.
then you can make anything else sell. You can turn a story around and it will sell.
Let's hold this discussion with the balance between business and public interest. Let's take a short break and press pass. We'll come back. I have a lot of your feedback as well, and then we'll delve into the discussion, creating the balance between business and public interest. We're back in a bit. And Press Bus is back. The discussion was still happening even during the break, but let me run through your response real quick on social media. Migwe Steven says it's two sides of the coin. First side, there's no development to be reported, but corruption left, right, and center. Second, the media doesn't create stories, but it's the same leaders who go in the funerals to talk about politics. Citizens like seeing Raila, Ruto in the newspaper. That's just the plain truth, Migwe Steven. Then we have Makan, who's a Monyo Otieno, says that's a no-brainer. Our media just doesn't want to research non-politics related issues. We provide zilch, international news, scanty sports, etc. I guess the fear is if a media house avoids politics, viewers will switch to competition. And we have here Paul, who says answers is an equivocal yes. We would like to see more investigative reporting on actual development agenda items like budgeting, who's accountable, as contracted companies to give progress reports. 2022 nonsense, Ingoje. All right, let's bring back that discussion, and Makali, I'll start with you. And this, Paul actually brings out one other issue. Accountability, as contracted companies to give progress reports. Do we even have access to those reports? Because that's the other issue. How open are they to give you, when you walk up to a contractor, will they even give you an interview to begin with?
Yeah, I think also the public needs to appreciate the challenges the media face. In terms of just access to information, the media scrounge around, they have to really dig around to get stories. And you can't succeed to get good stories of a particular nature all the time. As Machere just pointed out, the story, for example, of the quack doctor, you know, these things don't happen every day. You'll get stories of corruption. We'll unravel a lot of things. But that is dogged work daily.
Yeah.
And newspapers have certain limitations. And anybody who looks at the newspaper as the provider of all solutions in their life really needs to rethink their situation. The media only serves you what it can, and its role is to inform you, educate you, and entertain you. If we flip or are not balanced in those three respects, we stand condemned. But you know, we cannot be held responsible for non-fulfillment of any of those needs. We are serving. We are serving in an environment where I said, first, it's a business. A media house is in business. It will serve a product which will perpetuate that business. If it's not working, it will depart from that line. So the stories people want or expect to see are possible, but they take certain resources, certain time, and media houses are running.
Have you ever sent out a journalist specifically to go and look for a political story in a something different, like a coverage of a hospital being launched, for example? Have you ever sent out your journalists to tell them to go and look for a political
the point,
angle
Trevor, is this, Koki will agree with me. Everything is politics. Everything is politics. In every instance, there is a political dimension there, if you look properly. And we send reporters sometimes to look for a political dimension to a story if it is relevant or needs to be told. And you know, sometimes people get frustrated. You're having a press conference maybe about a new malaria vaccine, and the next day you see a story about how something else altogether, you know, emanates from that particular event. It happens because when we wanted to do that story, and this particular person who is at this press conference was to be the source of that story, they were not available, they were not forthcoming. So we'll catch up with them at that event, we will report what we wanted to get, and what was happening at that particular event might be lost in the process. It is a hazard that, you know, we have to live with in the course of our profession. And people blame us. People say, we called a press conference, we had all these great things we were saying. Imagine none of them was picked by these idiotic reporters.
But then that means, okay, I appreciate the idea that media is business, and I appreciate that it can be PR driven, but like you've asked a very specific questions, are there stories outside the PR, you know, business realm that can be told, and can we put resources into those stories? Because again, it's about just I'm not a media person, but I don't want to be also very out of the reality. But are there special desks or special incidents, or, you know, covering, for example, Wajir, is it a county or something? Yeah, are there special you know, times that you tell your journalists, go out and tell the story and give us different perspectives? A small team that would probably do that. Because again, it's good to talk about, it's good to talk about media as being a business, but in the minds of the public, media is the fourth estate, unless you decide to be a lapdog, or you understand the idea of just following up stories that have been, you know, posited to you by PR practitioners.
So you feel we're losing the agenda setting aspect of it?
I think that the public interest part of it needs attention.
Jari.
First of all, I would ask, who defines the public interest? I can sit in the newsroom, or Makali can sit in the newsroom and decide, this is the public interest, this is our line. But somebody else at the Standard or wherever else will have a different view. And you can be sure that somebody who is in politics will have a different view. So yes, it is a business, and it is true that we serve the public interest. But then often it is for each media house, or even more than that, for each title or each publication to define what is its priority. We'll get it wrong often, and I always say we put our mistakes on the headlines and we get crucified for it, for them. There are many things we can do better. There are many things that we could do that we are not doing, and almost every day is experimentation. What works and what doesn't work, what will sell and what will not sell. There are times you sit in the newsroom and come with this fantastic concept, and you do a special page one, a different design, a concept story, a great, what you think is a fantastic, great human interest story. The moment it's put on the streets, even the news vendor tells you
this one sell.
This one is not selling. you don't even have to go to the market research research people. The news vendor is the best market research person. They tell you, this one won't sell, and we will see the returns. So you burn your fingers. I remember one time we came up with this thing of some major inserts in the nation.
Yeah.
Every day an insert on a specific subject. You know, one of the first complaints we got was from readers.
Yeah.
Not that the concept is not good, but that the newspaper is too big. I can't read all of it. Then you have to explain to them that what you do, this insert you remove and you give to your daughter. Maybe it is for her. This one is a sports insert. Maybe it is for your son, and so on and so forth.
Robbie, there's a typical one from Jimmy Gakio. It says, media houses reports politics and personalized news on who did what and where than the wider current affairs of the nation. Media should play part in promoting culture, not unnecessary breaking news like the ship docks in Mombasa with Italian tourists.
I think the media, commercial media is challenged in that way. And I agree with my colleagues here that a strong public service would work very well to tell that story, okay? And a strong, what is it called, moneyed or taxed organization would work well to tell the stories. But that doesn't, extrapolate them from really going out of their way to tell the stories.
You know one of the problems I have with academics.
We all have problems.
You're one of them.
They push something in our schools what they call development journalism.
Yes.
But the fact is that one exists only in their world, or only in the minds of government people who want their development stories told. They have never done any research to tell us that readers want to read development stories or development journalism.
I think development journalism is not geared for media houses. Let me be honest.
No,
and let me defend
I'm saying if it is geared to be read, who is going to read it?
Development, in fact, it's not journalism, it's communication. Where you
you call it development communication, but what is the point of putting out a leaflet or a newspaper which nobody will?
It is not, you're not the audience.
Not me.
Yeah, you're not the audience.
But then that is
who is the audience?
Let me just, in fact, let me pick up with what
the audience is those in that particular field.
You know, in the 80s, and I'm sure
the ones in that field
about this. There was that drive about development communication. When you went to School of J, you were always being taught about development communication. It was a course. And in fact, the government had gone as far as setting up, publications, regional publications, Kericho Times, whatever, they were all over. Development, covering what was happening among the people, agricultural stories and whatnot. Why did those publications die? Because we are forcing people to read things. They are interested in those things, but they will not buy those publications. And as I've said, you have to balance between the commercial imperatives of a media house and the public interest. So that is why people go with what might be of greater public appeal, and you tuck in there stories of public interest, the agriculture, the health stories and whatnot. Because I can give my own account. When I was managing editor of the Standard, what happened? There was a major breakthrough, my friend. Kemri here had the first test tube baby. We thought that was a great thing for Kenya. So we went to the story of the breakthrough. Kenya making a breakthrough scientific with the first test tube baby done locally. Headline: we lost 40% of our sales. And that's great stuff, man.
But that is in
now,
one day.
What are you going to tell your shareholders?
But if it's in one day, if you continuously do that, then you will fail. You will close shop.
And there comes in the balance. Just to clarify, development communication from an academic perspective is meant for civil society,
not commercial media.
It's not community. And again,
somebody must pay for it.
If it's gonna be paid for, what will happen is those in that industry will have to have a media advocacy agreement with those in mainstream media so that they can be able to step down that information. So just to clarify that. So it's not really a journalism, area of study. It's more about in this field, in agriculture, what are we saying?
Macharia, for me, the main concern here is that alternative that we give the readers and the viewers as well. Because Alex Owiti here says the media holds a responsibility to agenda setting. Tharaka Nithi was a native advertising of some sort. It was poorly done. We needed to hear how much the county was allocated versus the development done.
And that's
Proper
politics,
audit.
isn't
That
it?
is politics. We went out there, showcased the culture of the people of Tharaka Nithi, trying to change the whole narrative of the stronghold edition. This is what they want. He says that is just a cultural native way of advertising what we wanted to hear.
And
how much they were given.
And it was also very PR-ish.
Yeah, so that's what they keep complaining about. So when you give that alternative,
you can go to Tharaka Nithi and tell the stories, what you might call the untold stories. Yes, you can catch the culture.
Yes.
You can catch the developments in agriculture and
everything
else, and tourism.
Alternatives,
but you can also look. But that doesn't mean that you cannot also at the same time look at what is wrong with Tharaka Nithi.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because not everything is hunky dory.
That is very true.
So we were with my colleagues the other day, and we were remembering the past. We were singing, Tawala Kenya, and we were remembering Utna. Utna, those kind of Dunia Wiki Hii.
Yes.
And we revered those programs because they gave us a perspective that was, outside what we had every day. So what we are saying is, media, please come back. Give us some of that. Give us some of the politics between, the animals, and the people who live nearby.
But now the question is, the we that you're talking about, how many are they actually have?
Now that is the question of resources.
Yeah, because then if you decide to serve the minor we, what about the larger population?
Let's be honest, today the journalist should be multifunction, isn't it? I expect you, Trevor, to have your very high-end what do you call it? Gadgets. Yes. I expect you to be able to have a very high-end small camera that you carry around. I expect you to be able to do all these things and give me a story. And that's what we hope we are training you to do.
Okay. Makali?
Well, I believe we are doing that. And modern journalists are, multimedia. They are competent to deliver stories on all platforms, print, broadcast, digital stuff. And then, but we must appreciate that we cannot be everything to everybody. If you can't find it here, you please look elsewhere. You get it.
Yeah.
Don't expect that because you buy The Nation, your whole world will be found in The Nation. If you read in The Star, everything must be found in The Star. That is not what media houses are made for.
But then what about our watchdog role?
So,
because my producer Rosalie is saying now of people are talking about 2022 politics as early as now. Are we going to cover it for the next 4 years? Or does it mean that if something bigger comes up, then we drop the 2022 politics and start covering that? And then what does that mean?
The news agenda is dynamic. Today we could be covering 2022 because that is the the in thing, that is what is occupying people's minds. And we're not the ones propelling it. It's being propelled by the political players. We can of course try to switch. We can deliberately switch off from that political agenda. But I've told you that if it is working and is serving your purposes, why do you want to destroy it? That's one thing that needs to guide us. People are reading this politics, they want to be informed about it.
So you don't want to reinvent the wheel.
So tomorrow you decide, we don't want to talk about 2022, let's begin talking about something else. How, can't even imagine what. You see how difficult it is to create a news agenda.
Let me put it another way. If those guys who are out there campaigning for 2022,
yes, stop.
We will have no option.
We will stop.
We will also try to look at why they have stopped.
We'll still ask them why they stopped.
Every 2022 is going on. It is something which, even when it's not on the headlines today, it is humming along in the background.
Okay.
But every day there's another story somewhere. The other day we were consumed with court stories of some murders. Previously, there was all these scandals which were occupying our time, corruption, again, court cases and developments from police. These things are there all the time.
So are we just playing to the whims of the public, like she was saying?
No. Sometimes we are setting the agenda because Macharo will tell you, for example, we'll break a story.
Who pushed the corruption stories until the government finally decided the government, which was saying that they have they're on top of everything, had to consider that they're not.
There are
and they made it their agenda now.
I have to take a quick
there are
break
other
now.
players who push the story. We all know that social media is rife with stories.
Okay.
They might not be verifiable,
okay,
but they are easily broken
social
at
media
that
is yet
space.
to get there.
And then the media then picks it up. And then we would say that it is autonomously the role of the media to break out these stories.
Yeah.
And again, I think
we're talking about the media in general.
Oh, the media, no, you don't need to now give it some different dimension.
I will take a quick break.
You see, if it was before, when media was one media house, then we would say, oh yes, it really has tackled this issue by itself.
Yeah.
But if the sources of the stories come from various platforms, really what media would do and is needed for is to verify those stories and tell them, give them different perspectives.
Okay.
I always think that media can take a story and give it a perspective that nobody thought about.
Okay.
And I know that in the process of framing, you can do that. You can add context to what you're saying. You can be able to emphasize what you think is important in the context, in the story, and people will get it. I mean, we are not in the days where people are just following, voyeurism, as if we are watching, what do you call this, a soap opera. No, we are not in that era.
But Kenya is a soap opera.
Not necessarily.
It's playing out in real time. Let's take a quick break now. When we come back, we talk about public support to the media and the issues we cover, and whether the public are with us or against us. Welcome back to Press Pass. The discussion is still on whether we are the ones fueling the political agenda for 2022, or are we simply just reporting? Have we done our bit as the agenda setters? Are we failing the people who are watching, and how do we create that balance between business and public interest? And who decides what public interest is? Let me run through your questions here. Alex Owiti says, and he's speaking about the support we were talking about. He says the public is with the media, but are the media houses with their journalists, especially when they ruffle feathers of big politicians. Many journalists have been condemned and abandoned when they expose powerful individuals. Alex Taylor has a question for Makali and says, what happened to house styles? That's why we stick to different newspapers, because of the kind of content they produce. Have we lost it? The house styles, are we sticking to our principles, or are we just covering what's happening?
Every media house has what they call editorial policy or editorial platform. And they are all different. I mean, if you look at the Nation Group or Standard or the Star, where I am, we have different approaches to reporting these issues. And we boast of those, unique characteristics. So I don't think we have changed. If anybody reads, they'll find the strand that of journalism that is practiced by the Star is different from the strand of journalism practiced by the Nation or the Standard, for example, or any other publication. We could cover stories that could be alike. There could be issues we'll all pursue because they're of public interest, but there could be differences in the writing or approaches to covering those issues. So it's up to you to choose. As I said, don't expect everything in one place. If you can, then lucky you. But otherwise, I don't think you can.
Okay.
How different is different? It would be the question, you see. If everyone is pursuing the same issue, how different is different? Because I think the house style gives you a reason to go to the Star. I mean, the story, the way it's written, gives you a reason to go to any other side.
You see, for example,
but how similar and different are they? That's the question.
For example, I mean, I don't want to name which publication it is, but there's a publication or a media house that styles itself as pro-business.
Yeah.
Meaning they report issues in a manner that advances an environment that is conducive for conducting business or investment. Our product, the Star, for example, styles itself as a political newspaper. We report politics from all dimensions. So if you want to get politics, you know where to go. If you want to get to the other kind of journalism, you go where you get it. But don't expect to get bread where they're serving, cabbage. Obviously, the expectations are going to be disappointed.
From where you stand, do we even have public support in terms of our coverage?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think from all surveys I've seen, I think the media remains one of the most trusted institutions in Kenya. But that does not mean we should be complacent. Because first of all, the media of today cannot be compared to the media of 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were talking about Nation and Standard, and today there is Nation and Standard, 3 or 4 other titles, the Star, the People Daily, and then there is another whole universe out there of what you might call alternative media, the social media. Then there is this explosive growth in radio. Every village and every place, every street now has a radio station. Maybe catching its own small niche audience, whether it is an ethnic audience or a religious audience or a youth audience, whatever it is. But the media has changed beyond recognition. But overall, I do think there is public support for the media, but there is also a lot of public dissatisfaction. And that often has to do with that this media does not represent me or what I want. But when it comes to that, we often tend to think of the big media houses, forgetting that there are so many other alternatives. Another thing which I always like to point out is that people like to see the media that represents them and that carries the stories they want and that reports the way they want to see things reported. And the analogy I give is like people at a stadium, at a football stadium. They will be there cursing the players, cursing the coach. Pass to that one, why are you passing that way instead of this way? Their own team, the team they support, they're busy casting the players and giving them instructions on what to do and what not to do. That is the same way people look at the media.
Yeah, yes. And it's actually true because Koki Kibi Eliud here says mainstream media has pullouts on health, agriculture, education, and other development aspects. But is the audience reading them?
Maybe that's why they're asking the questions. Where are the questions coming from? People are reading more. It might not be as we might not be as book smart as is expected, but I think people read more, small bits but more, and then if it's something that's of interest, they'll read deep into it. So, and again, you're not the only source of that information. So again, if I want to look into a story, I'll go online, click and see if it's something I'm interested in.
You know, I would think that every serious media house carries out research into what its audiences want. First of all, of course, they define their audience, and then they decide whether are we reaching our audience or not. And based on that, they can refine their product, improve their product, or change their product altogether, depending on who they want to reach or how they're doing. And I think the Star is a good example. When it started out, it was the paper, the apolitical paper. It was not reporting
politics at all.
It was looking for human interest stories. Then after a while, I realized
this is not working.
It's not working. The Nation had what I thought was a beautiful paper called Daily Metro. In fact, my own estimation was that this thing one day will overtake the Daily Nation in sales.
Yes. It didn't.
Did it last 2 years? No, it never went into politics. It just didn't. It had what I thought were beautiful human interest stories. It died.
But the politics has withstood the test of time.
Yeah, because we are a political society, and people. My friend Oyo has just sent me a message saying, "Look, where he lives, people follow the stations which are covering politics. In fact, if your station is not covering politics, they'll keep flipping and passing it. So the voices that are saying less politics or abandon this story, if you ask me, are in the minority, because if we're in the majority, the media would follow that voice.
But is it
because there is nobody who does not
right there, Makani?
Trevor,
because
why
we
would it
why
everybody wants
to be the
audiences?
defenders of the people. We're supposed to also have their stories highlighted, but we decide to pick what they want, even if it's not good for them.
So then what's the difference between what you're writing and what the people want? Because if you're
there is a
writing
meeting
to my
point.
whim,
There's a meeting point.
Yeah.
What you're writing and what the people want is met in the audiences you get. Whether you're a radio station or a newspaper, the answer lies in the viewership or sales. That's how you know whether you're getting it right or not.
But
There's no other method.
It's foolhardy to imagine that audiences are as constant as they've been. And that fluidity needs to be looked into because they are not as constant. And people are just not interested. I mean, if you look at, and I don't want to go academic, media effects. Media today has limited, that's mainstream media, has limited media effects. I mean, people are not just following it, like I said, through voyeurism. There are interests that this media, who have as large resources as they do, can tap into, and we still will be following you. The Kenya Audience Research Fund, fund always finds that media is king. 90% of Kenyans believe in media. But why don't we just try to give them something else that links the 2022 to what's happening today? That's the question that we are asking.
And this is what Edwin Shaw is also saying. He says, though the media is a commercial entity, it should always be factual, truthful, objective, and relevant. And they should never sacrifice these principles because of making money. They should strike harmony in making money and upholding those same principles.
I would agree absolutely.
That's true.
And I agree absolutely. What I always say is this. First of all, there is no doubt that the media in Kenya is commercial, and that is not something to fight about, because unless you can make commercial sense, then you might as well close down, because you're not going to depend on government for funding, or let me call it donor funding. You must make sense. You must be able to sell. But then also, I think we have a bigger responsibility than any other business. We sell newspapers, not fish and chips or beer. Therefore, we know that we are the only industry in Kenya that is specifically protected by the Constitution. And I think that gives us a bigger responsibility, that we know we are a public, we're not just a business, but we are a public service. And the question, the challenge is in getting the balance right.
Yes.
We fail to get it right, we shut down. As simple as that.
Okay. Makali?
I see people dismissing the media, and I really feel I sympathize with them, because people have got this notion that because of the social media and the many sources of information you have, you can discard what I call the mainstream or traditional media.
Yeah.
That is not possible. There is no replacement yet for that newspaper, that TV station, because the information that we're putting out is processed through very clear systems of fact-checking and establishing truth. We may not get it all the time, but it's the closest we can get to getting reliable information on anything. Social media is out there. People flash around anything they get and they run with it.
Yeah.
But still, we are dependable, and we want to defend that territory, and it will be probably to remain like that for a very long time.
Nobody is arguing against
social media will always be first with the news. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
They will beat us every day on breaking news. But let's face it, until that piece of news is verified by mainstream media, you don't quite take it seriously.
Therefore, legacy news is still king, but it still needs to tell a variety of stories.
And in fact, it's interesting because Dennis Itumbi has tweeted and he says, I would love to hear the panelists on the issue of covering politics. Why does the 5 minutes of political chat take the center stage and leave out the roads, electricity, even when they're humanized?
Itumbi is a very interesting. I know where Dennis is coming from. Because soon after that one, he wrote a piece how the deputy president today presided over the installation of electricity at some woman's house. That is what he called the humanization
story.
For him, that is him. He's doing PR for the deputy president. As simple as that.
But isn't there an aspect of the human part?
If
electricity is actually given to a lady who did not expect it in a home that was never covered by electricity, isn't it
these humanized
Let me ask you,
stories
Trevor.
are being carried every day,
but
not necessarily at the direction of political players. As simple as that.
So,
humanized stories must be told from the human.
From the human,
the very human.
But if the person themselves say that the government installed electricity in my house, I never had it before,
it is
how
not
wrong
about
is that?
the government. The government is there to use taxes to give us those electricity.
So they should be doing it
It is
anyway.
the impact of that.
And these are not political favors.
Exactly. And it is the impact of that electricity in my heart that should be the story, not what is being done, which obviously needs to be done. He has a point, yes, humanize, but for the right intention.
Okay. Let's diffuse this conversation in just a bit. I'll come back to get your final comments in just a bit. But as Gor Mahia ready to take on English side Everton tomorrow night for the SportPesa Trophy, and tonight's backstory, we feature sports journalist Timothy Olobulu. Here's his take.
Basically, my job is my hobby. Sports is something that I've loved all my life. If I wasn't a sports reporter, I'd be a footballer or something. So I enjoy it because it's what I love doing. It's what I find happiness in doing, and getting to interact with different people at very different points and getting to get all the emotions of a sports person. It's just thrilling. You have to make people who haven't watched the match or seen the race feel as though they were there with you when they are watching. So just inform the masses about what has happened, the emotions that were there, and make them feel as though they were part of it, even though they were not.
Then comes into it, Olunga goes for a shot, it's in the net!
Sports is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. You get to play around with words. When you mention death in hard news, it might actually mean something very serious, but at the death in, for example, football is at the final whistle. So it's something that you get to enjoy. It's not too strict, like you have to follow a certain procedure, this and that. But just as basic reporting, you have to follow the simple rules of reporting, the 4 W's and the H. In 2012, Harambee Stars played in Uganda, Sekafa Senior Challenge Cup. And most people had written off that team. They'd said that this team cannot do nothing. And I'm a very big fan of Harambee Stars. And I had several friends playing at that time. I remember in the semi-finals, it was so emotional because Harambee Stars were a goal down. And I was like, wow, we're just losing this game. I was taking photos. I couldn't even hold my camera. I was shaking. So I was literally shaking. When we equalized, I was celebrating. I forgot to take photos of the guys who were celebrating after scoring. And I remember when we won, I shouted so loud that at some point, a colleague of mine who's called Mohammed Amin. He used to work for The Nation those years back. He asked me, are you here for the work or for celebrating the team? So I get carried away so many times because sports is emotional, especially when you love, for example, a particular team. It's so emotional. Even athletics. Recently, when Conseslus Kipruto was running in, I think it was Stockholm, he ran barefoot almost. Like the final, from lap 2, he was running barefoot, and I was there just hoping this guy wins. I remember in the final lap, I was watching the race all alone. I attracted everyone in the office because of the way I was shouting, because this guy is winning barefoot against people who are running with shoes. So sometimes you get carried away. A very famous coach, he coached Celtic at some point. He said that football is all about the fans. It's not about the players. It's not about anyone. It's all about the fans. Without the fans, there's no football. So in that game, it was one of the best atmospheres I've ever covered Harambee Stars. In my short career, it's not very long, it's a very short career I've had, but it's the best I've ever covered Harambee Stars in. The stadium was full, and sometimes it's the politics that's very difficult to handle, because as a football reporter, or generally as a sports reporter, politics is not our thing, but sometimes you find that there's too much politics in sports, and you have to remain objective. You have to go to court, for example, right now because of the Rio guys, they're in court. You have to learn the court lingo and stuff. When you're going to, for example, the police station, you have to know the police lingo. So that's where the challenge comes in sometimes, when you have to step out of what you're used to every day.
And good news, we'll be airing that match live tomorrow at 10 p.m. Gor Mahia versus Everton. And like Mashari wanted to make a comment on that, and Tim says if there's too much politics in football, it goes into football as well.
I would say it's a great opportunity for Gor Mahia. It could be a great opportunity for young players if they get spotted by the English scouts. But I fear we are being conned.
Why?
We are in the middle of the English season, Premiership season.
So
it is not an international break.
Yeah.
Can Everton risk even one of the first 11 players for a friendly game? Let us wait and see tomorrow. A junior team or a second squad. Second team.
All right.
At least it's a second squad.
But we'll be airing the match live at 10 p.m. So I'd like to get your final comments on the issue of the agenda setting of the media really fast, starting from Makali.
Yeah. I think the media has its own failings. We admit that we are not doing, we are not excellent. We try our best within the circumstances. But also I think the public needs to appreciate that the media is a broad spectrum. You cherry pick where your interests are. Don't expect or don't try to put or build a media house with your needs. That's not likely to work for you. Find the information where you can get it, the different sources. If you don't like here, get here.
Yeah.
There's a reason why media report the things they do. They think we're obsessed about the politicians and so forth. That is not the truth. The truth of the matter is that these people are important in society, and what they do, what they say, has certain implications or ramifications. That's why we report them. And we are likely to continue reporting them, because that is the call of journalism.
Okay. Macharia, you'll have the final say. We are gentlemen. The lady has the final say.
Okay. There's a lot we can do better. We must listen to our audiences. We must figure out what is changing. Let's face it, the media landscape is changing. The audiences are changing. Newspaper sales are not growing.
Yeah.
Where are the readers going? What is it that we are not giving them? Where else are they getting the information and the news they need beyond what we can give them in the legacy media? We must do a lot to remain relevant.
Okay.
I think all of us in Kenya, and that's not just in Kenya, I think it's a global phenomenon, we have been struggling with the issue of what you might call the converged newsroom, and that migration to the digital media space. We must do more to learn exactly how to manage it and how to grow our audiences in that direction.
Okay. Robbie?
They've said it well. And they've pleasantly said some of the things I'd like to say.
Yeah.
But I think legacy media still is prime. It's important. It still has a very important role, social responsibility to play. And therefore, because of that, it holds resources that in terms of people, in terms of equipment, in terms of everything, to change the way stories are told and to give prominence to stories that might be relevant. Yes, it's good to talk about politics. Everything is political, but then there are things that we need to relate to as individuals, and these stories can be told in different genres and about different things that matter to us.
All right, and that does it for Press Pass. Thank you so much for making time for us. Robbie Kokio Chieng, lecturer at journalism and communication at USIU, Mashara Guy, the veteran journalist, and David Makali, head of content, Radio Africa. My name is Trevor Ombija. It's a pleasure having you with us. Next week, Olive Barrows takes over Press Pass until Mark Masai returns, and we certainly hope this is the show where you can tell us where we go wrong. We can always rectify. We'll read your response. We may get it wrong sometimes, we may fail you sometimes, but we certainly hope sometimes we've picked you up. I'm Trevor Ombija. Good night.